Hello and welcome to TelecomTV's panel discussion on the real value of cellular IoT. We're here at the Mobile World Congress discussion zone at the HPE booth at MWC 2017. And I'm joined by three guests who I'd like to introduce now. Starting on my immediate right, Sanjay Aiyagari, who is Global Solution Architect for the Telco vertical at Red Hat. Sanjay, nice to meet you. Thanks for joining us today. Next to Sanjay, we have Lawrence Latham, who is the COO of everynet.
Yes, nice to meet you.
You too. And next to Lawrence, on the end, last but not least, we have Mobeen, IoT Strategy and Product Management at AT&T.
Thank you for having me.
So we've got a nice mixture. We've got a nice mixture of vendors and operators, and we should have a very good discussion on what exactly is the value of cellular IoT. We talk about IoT, we know there's alternatives to cellular IoT. LPWA is being implemented and rolled out as we speak. There's very short-range technologies. Maybe we can start with this. You know, what are, for businesses who are looking at IoT, what are their connectivity options? Mobeen, perhaps we can have a look at what their connectivity, especially the cellular connectivity options, because there are quite a few of them.
Sure. So, you know, when we talk to our customers, we talk about connectivity from a more expansive perspective than just cellular. Many of our customers are looking for connectivity options through cellular, of course, but also other means like satellite, Wi-Fi, short-range communications. It all really depends on what the needs of the customers are, where the solutions are being deployed, and especially, so for example, containers at sea, you're going to need satellite. Things down in 3 levels of basement, you may need some short-range communication, Wi-Fi, mesh networks. And when you're in mobile, or you have things that are outside, you can use cellular. And within cellular, you have multiple forms of cellular. You have LTE for if you're doing video communications, or LTE-M if you're doing low power, long power, long battery life kind of communications. You have LTE-M. So there's many different options. And when we engage with IoT customers, we look at all of the different options for them.
So, building on what Mobeen said, the way I tend to look at it, and since we've started in M2M and IoT now, but people have always looked for a one-size-fits-all solution. And IoT is a market of markets. There's no one-size-fits-all solution for applications or connectivity. And just as he mentioned, satellite, cellular, you know, even today, depending on which analyst you believe, approximately 70% of all IoT connections are unlicensed. So as he talked about short-range technologies and things like that, makes sense. It also brings into play things like LPWA, which we can get into a little bit later.
Sanjay, we see this mix, we see that IoT is not just one solution, fits all.
Right. Yeah, that's definitely true. And you know, Red Hat has a IoT program where we have partners. The first of which was announced fairly recently, the Eurotech Gateway, and it's modular and it can support all the different various connectivity types for an IoT gateway. So this is an area where we've spent a lot of time and effort in terms of developing what our customers need in this area.
When we look at cellular, Mobeen, from AT&T's perspective, I'd like to hear this. For a customer who says, okay, if we think cellular is the right way, or they are advised that cellular is the right approach, within that we have different types of technologies. Is it beholden to the operator to decide, I'm going to roll out an NB-IoT, I'm going to roll out a Cat M1, or what have you? Is it the operator who makes that decision, or is it down to the user who says, I want that technology?
Yeah, so customers typically are not buying a connectivity option. They're buying some end-to-end solution, and the needs of that solution define what they need. Now, we do engage with them, our solution architects engage with them, and figure out the right mix of technologies. And many times it could be multiple pieces of technology. So for example, we deploy smart meters. And in some cases, those smart meters may contain LTE-M modules because they're deployed outside and open. But in other cases, it may be a mesh network inside of an apartment building and a collector, cellular collector at the end, that then takes that data. So It really depends on the solution, the ROI analysis, the costs, and so on to make that decision.
Yeah, absolutely. So we actually have developed a matrix, a connectivity matrix. It depends on what your application is, quality of service that you need, and at the end of the day, everything is driven by economics, right? What's the ARPU? What's the lowest? What's the most, the best ROI I can get on the solution? And so that, to us, that quality of service in the end application, that's going to drive it, because when you're talking about when it was 100,000 connections, cost, yes, it matters. When you're talking about millions, and now especially billions, pennies matter. Pennies matter.
And when you work with telco customers, your telco partners, are you advising them on technology choice? Are you looking at from that technology up, or are you saying, like our colleagues, it's the solution that matters?
No, it's for us especially, it's the solution that matters. I mean, we're not a networking company, but every one of these IoT devices and IoT solutions needs a cloud-based data collection algorithm. It needs operations that are running more complex. They need to connect to the cloud and have part of the application run in the cloud. And so when you start looking at the abilities of building cloud applications, new types of cloud applications, we're seeing that the OpenShift platform is becoming very popular. And so between the gateway, which uses a lot of the same components, all open source, and the OpenShift cloud environments, we're finding that that's a really nice synergy in order to build these applications and solutions.
If I may add one thing, from a network point of view, customers may choose multiple network technologies, but what is important to them is the ability to go to one place to manage connections, manage their connectivity options, open up trouble tickets, diagnose problems. So one of the things that we provide, working with a lot of different service providers, us and others included, like Satellite and others, is to give them a single place where they can go to manage all of their connectivity options. And that's important as they build out these millions of devices. It's important to have those diagnostic tools, because you don't want to manage it across 4 or 5 different dashboards or different user interfaces.
Still on the technology angle, we'll move off the technology very, very soon. I think many of us might have been surprised by the growth of low power wide area usage and networks. Lawrence, you briefly alluded to this earlier on in our discussion. Yes. Elaborate on LPWA.
Well, so when you look at low power radio, there are a couple of different options. There's cellular version, right? NB-IoT, 3GPP, or technology such as LoRaWAN, Sigfox, and others like that. When you get to use cases, right, and economics and ARPUs and costs, there are, and given how many wireless, the use of unlicensed spectrum already, now low power radio gives you the range that cellulars had before with unlicensed. And as customers look at it, they have a much now cheaper option to go with to get that type of range. Where it comes down between, do you use licensed or unlicensed? Quality service, right? Is it my grandma's medical device? Okay, I want some SLAs from this guy. Is it a sensor that needs to report in and report in once a day? Then I'm going to use unlicensed technology. And I believe that we'll see in the LPWA space, just like we've seen in general IoT connectivity, the lion's share will be the unlicensed because of costs, driven by costs.
Yeah, I would differ a little bit. Our point of view is that customers deploying IoT solutions are not deploying them for 3 months, 6 months, 9 months. They're deploying them for 5, 10 years. So they're looking for reliability, they're looking for scalability, security, they're looking for something that someone can manage those pieces for them on their behalf. And so our view is that we need to go with a standard technology with licensed spectrum. Costs are very important, and they need to continue to go down. But just like in the GSMA world in the last 10, 15 years, costs are driven down over time, over volumes. And we see the same trend continue in narrowband IoT and in LTE-M.
And that's interesting. However, the 3GPP working group actually has an unlicensed. They have an unlicensed working group for 3GPP.
That is correct.
And many of the companies, such as our partner Nokia, are offering the same levels of quality and service. And just because it's unlicensed doesn't mean it's unreliable, right? Again, over 70% of IoT connections today are already unlicensed, so it does not mean unreliable.
Sanjay, you've probably got a different perspective on this.
Well, I think what's really interesting about the increasing range is where in the past you always needed some kind of on-site collector. When you take the increasing range and you take the initiatives like Cord from AT&T, you start to wonder, well, if I'm only 2 or 3 miles away from the devices, could I just run a lot of the gateway functions as a cloud service itself? And that gives you a better, different business model where you can offer something higher level than just the connectivity.
Yeah, and actually there's a very nice, so I'll bring it all around for you.
Okay, good.
There's nice use cases that we see where there's a combination of licensed and unlicensed technology. For example, let's say you're deploying in a farm, and you can put an unlicensed technology on the farm for collecting a lot of sensor data, and it's dedicated to that. But then you have backhaul that could be cellular based. So there's a lot of use cases in the industrial world where you will see a combination of these technologies getting deployed.
Yes. And in fact, to support what he said, most LoRaWAN based stations, for example, use either Ethernet or cellular. Cellular is either the primary or failover backhaul. Like I said earlier, it's not one size fits all. And to your point, you can have Bluetooth devices at edge with a LoRa collector that go back to a LoRa gateway that then is backhauled over his network. So this is a very likely scenario. There is something interesting about that I would be curious about. There seems to be a competition between licensed or unlicensed, and we do see them being as complementary. And so in many parts of the world, mobile operators are adopting both a 3GPP and an unlicensed standard such as LoRa or et cetera. And so it's interesting to me, if you tried to compete with a licensed technology that costs more, and not employ an unlicensed technology, would a network operator be at risk of absolutely cannibalizing their licensed revenues to try to compete with this lower cost?
Yeah, I think there are certain use cases which fit each of those, even within the licensed world. For example, there are use cases in water meters that was just not possible with a full LTE network because of the economics. But once you put in the LTE-M solution, the cost of the device comes down, you get additional 12 to 15 dB margins, you get a long 5 to 10 year battery life. Suddenly this use case becomes real on even the licensed technology. So I think the use cases are going to drive what kind of technologies and solutions we will start to see.
Sanjay, do we see a requirement to drive costs down for devices and solutions, at the same time get reliability and service levels up?
Well, I think in terms of cost, that's largely up to the operators to figure out on the cost side of things. And I think, as you said, with the new technologies they're coming down. But the other side of things is really important, is the reliability and security. And this is where we believe, you really need to think about, okay, I'm putting my devices, I'm putting my gateways in there, they're going to be there for 10 years. Who's going to support all the components that are on there, like 10 years from now, when you still need to maintain it? And so the operating system you have, the management systems you have on those components are very, very important. And you have to, I think customers and operators really need to think through that in terms of their selection.
So, to his point, open source, which he mentioned a little bit earlier, extremely important. Yeah. And I have a saying, IoT, it really doesn't stand for Internet of Things, it stands for interoperability of things. Because you need to be able, if you can't support, if a vendor goes out of business, you need to be able to plug and replace. No different than we use Wi-Fi today. These technologies have to work like that.
There seems to be a bit of a dilemma with enterprise customers. We know the big users of IoT. We've been in some filming quite recently, industrial IoT events, and talking to utility companies especially, who will say, okay, the cellular providers want our business, want our IoT business, but we're very happy within the confines of our operational area with our own solution, our own connectivity, our own enterprise partners. When we get to a gateway, then the cellular. Cellular, you can provide the connectivity, you can provide that bulk, as long as you give it to me at a decent price. And that's all we really want you for. So is it a difficult job to say, no, we provide more than that? It's not just a lowest price game.
Yeah, so AT&T, for example, offers not just connectivity options, but we look at solutions in sort of 3 layers. So there's the connectivity, and obviously multiple options on connectivity and management of that. But then we offer sort of northbound platforms that allow developers, SIs, solution builders, enterprises to build applications. Some examples of that right out here, partnership with HP, for example, where developers and SIs have actually used those platforms that tie into connectivity options to the gateways that are out there and make those. And then at the layer higher than that, there are certain areas like fleet management or asset management or healthcare patient monitoring where we have end-to-end solutions. You can come into AT&T and you can buy a complete patient monitoring solution. Includes hardware from partners, some specific applications, as well as connectivity bundled for a single price. That's the ease of use that some of these customers are looking for. They're not necessarily looking to build everything from ground up. And so in certain areas, it makes sense to offer these as a bundled option.
This is, of course, Mobile World Congress, and you can't go anywhere in Mobile World Congress without coming across 5G.
Yeah.
We know we're in a pre-standards phase at the moment. There's a lot of work going on. By 2020, we are promised the first real results of 5G. During the process of creating what we think is 5G, IoT was always an essential component of this. How do we think 5G will alter the cellular IoT business and the operator's ability to offer IoT?
He's the best guy to answer this.
Yeah, so 5G is really important, not just for IoT, but for the evolution of the mobile networks. There are many use cases on video and other areas where it's important. Specifically to IoT, there are certain use cases that are very near and dear to operators, especially AT&T. So for example, the one I like to talk about is the car. And today we connect cars for diagnostics, for in-car entertainment, Wi-Fi, but we are all moving into this semi-autonomous or near-autonomous kind or real autonomous vehicles, and that would require low latency, high throughput, a lot of data being collected in single places, connectivity, fast connectivity to not just the vehicles, but to infrastructure around you, and that's perfect use case for a 5G rollout. Now, I know we're not there yet today. We are evolving, to your point. We are running trials. We just announced something at American Center for Mobility in Michigan, where it's a test bed for autonomous. We're going to put 5G there. Car manufacturers, smart city companies can come in and actually test it in a real life environment. So we are in a test phase. We're going to be in a test phase for a while into this.
So just looking at how long it's taken for 3GPP, the NB-IoT type standards to come out, they're still not even here today in a mature way. So for us, 5G, it looks, it's great. We talk about it, we look, we plan, but you said 2020. I've actually heard 2023 more. So I'm just more of a realist about how long that this takes. And if we've looked at some of the MDM adoption curves, right? Where we've gone through, primarily cellular MTM, wired before that, now where we have some of the other standards coming out in the curves. We are able to condense them because of everything that we've learned. I've had the opportunity to work with these guys in the past. And so we've learned a lot about how to do this. And like he said about packaging end-to-end solutions. Customers don't need a bag of bits. They need solutions, right?
Yeah, and I'll say nobody's waiting for 5G to install IoT. I think that's continuing. There's a lot of momentum behind IoT. 5G is going to be an important evolution of the network for certain use cases, but the momentum behind IoT is continuing.
People have business problems to solve today.
Yeah.
You're seeing the need to start planning for 5G IoT and what that can bring, or is the focus primarily on sort of LTE-based IoT?
Well, I mean, as you said, it's happening today. And customers just want the applications to run. They want, and whatever the connectivity is, it is behind it.
So, final point then. I wonder if you could all articulate what we feel we need to do to really prove the value of cellular IoT. I think we're all advocates of cellular IoT in the right instances, but sure. Is there any more that we can do as an industry to really show what the value is of cellular IoT?
I would say that it's not so much cellular IoT. There are a lot of building IoT solutions is still a very complex undertaking. So if you compare that to how you build an application on your mobile phones, we all know we go download an SDK from X or Y, and we build an app, we put it on the App Store, and voila, people start to download it, and the whole ecosystem is there. There's nothing like that in IoT. You still have to build all the piece parts. You have to maybe even do embedded programming on the device, which is not people comfortable with. So I think there's those obstacles that we have to overcome to even further propagate this market. Cellular is one of the options. It's a great option, but I think customers to adopt IoT are going to use all the options out there for connectivity.
Comprehensive solutions and lower ARPUs, lower costs, driving the cost down. Price elasticity, doesn't care what connectivity that you're using, and the more that we can reduce the cost, the more uptake there's going to be, and that's how we're going to achieve those scale numbers.
And how do we help developers choose a platform or get to a platform and have the confidence that what they develop is widely usable? As you mentioned, on the mobile phone side, in the app stores, I mean, they know, okay, if I develop an iOS and Android app, I've covered it, right? And I've got two SDKs, I know I got to use these.
That's right.
What do I do where, okay, you mentioned you have a great developer ecosystem and tools, but your competitors also have developer ecosystems and tools, and around the world, if I want to deploy globally, then those providers also have ecosystem, the tools.
Actually, what I would say is that, let's say us, AT&T, we have 20,000 IoT developers building on our platforms. Yeah. It's a good number, but when you compare that people that are deploying on clouds, it's hundreds of thousands. Yeah. So all the operators combined have a long way to go to engage the IT development community, engage the developers so that they can develop more and more IoT solutions, good for all of us.
So we've taken a little bit different approach at Everynet, and we have an app store. If you go around here, there are hundreds of thousands of IoT apps at Mobile World Congress today. And so we've worked with them to integrate them in our app store. I have a different perspective from you because I'm not in that business. And so we have apps that are by proven trusted parties that are already ready to go in our app store that, by the way, they don't care whether it's cellular connectivity or LoRaWAN. So.
Right. Well, we could talk for a lot longer on this subject, but unfortunately, we have to bring our discussion to an end. But gentlemen, thank you all very much indeed. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much.
Bye.